Hi guys, so it's been a little while, but we are back with The Secret Zoo by Bryan Chick, and it's getting to be pretty exciting because Noah, Ella, and Richie seem to be getting pretty deep into finding out more information as to maybe where Megan has gone. So our next chapter is called Chapter 25, not 5, and it is called Noah on Ice. Now thinking back to what we read before, with the chapter called Noah on Ice, do you remember where he was? He was with the penguins, remember? All right, so here we go. Charlie's over here listening, being a really good boy, aren't you? And then Gracie, because I know you guys like to see the animals. So there's Charlie being a good boy. And there's Gracie being a good girl. Gracie, you being a good girl? You gonna listen to the story? Yeah, you like it when I read, huh? So they are sitting right there listening while you guys listen too. All right, chapter 25 is called Noah on Ice. A huge penguin rounded the block of ice. He was as tall as Noah, and he looked like he weighed close to 60 pounds. As he waddled forward, the blubber on his belly rolled from side to side. He stopped in front of the scout, tipped back his head, and casually aimed his bill upward, the way penguins do. "Podgy?" Noah said. "You are Podgy, right?" The penguin didn't reply. "Tank told me to meet you." Noah paused for a second. "Can you understand what I'm saying?" Still no response. Tank said, without warning, the penguin dropped his bill and lunged into Noah. Penguin and the boy crashed downward, hit the ice, and rolled into the water. Noah sank. On one side was the icy island, and on the other was the long glass wall of the aquarium. He heard muffled splashes, one after another. Penguins were diving in around him. They started to swim up and down the channel, churning the water. Noah panicked and gulped freezing water. His rear end struck something, the bottom of the tank. Looking up, he could see only the white undersides of swimming penguins. He pushed up from the floor of the tank, but a penguin struck him down. Dazed, he sank a second time. Around him, the icy water churned. He felt faint, like he might pass out. He was exhausted. He never should have trusted Tank. Tank had said the fate of the world depended on keeping the secrets of the zoo safe. Noah's life was an easy trade. Another penguin crashed into him. Noah gulped more water, and he knew he was seconds from drowning. Chapter 26. I know, cliffhanger, Charlie. Can you believe it? Little dogs of the prairie. The prairie dogs darted between Ella's legs and across her feet. Every minute or so, one of them yipped so loudly that Ella feared she'd stepped on it. She checked the bottom of her shoe each time, freaked out by the thought of finding the animal's remains stuck in the treads like a horrible mass of furry gum. The prairie dogs led the scouts past the zebras and camels to the prairie dog exhibit. Called Little Dogs of the Prairie, it was set in the ground and looked like a long, shallow pool filled with sandy dirt, patches of grass, and tiny mounded hills. The walls along its perimeters, we know what a perimeter is. The walls along the perimeter were steep and high. They were meant to keep the prairie dogs from getting out. Little Dogs of the Prairie resembled a miniature desert. Across it, the animals had made at least 50 holes. Holes that led to a complex maze of underground tunnels. The animals leaped over the perimeter wall and raced around, raising clouds of dust. Some dived into holes and immediately poked their heads back up to look around. They appeared to Ella to be reassuring themselves that their night operation was progressing smoothly. A few didn't return to the sandy pit. Instead, they bit into Ella and Richie's jeans and pulled them along a narrow sidewalk toward the rear of their habitat. "Hey," Ella said. My guess, Richie said as his foot was dragged forward, is that they want us to go this way. Ella knew where they were being taken. At the back of the exhibit, stairs led down to 5 artificially constructed tunnels, an attraction for young visitors. The tunnels ran beneath the sandy terrain, and children were able to crawl into the tunnels and pop their heads up through special holes on the prairie dog hillsides to see what it was like. Their heads were protected by plastic bubbles that covered the holes and prevented the animals from chewing off the kids' noses. This part of the zoo attraction was affectionately or lovingly named Little Kids on the Prairie. The prairie dogs dragged Ella and Richie down the stairs. Then they scattered, leaving the children alone. The scouts dropped to their hands and knees and crawled into the main tunnel. Traces of moonlight shone the way. Now would be a good time to use that pen light you donated to the rhino exhibit, Ella said. Richie said nothing. He was familiar with Ella's sharp tongue. The main tunnel split in 5 secondary tunnels, which led in different directions. At the end of each one was an open space big enough for kids to stand up in. Ella crawled along the first tunnel. She stood at the end, poked her head up through the hole, and peered through the glass bubble. Prairie dogs were scurrying everywhere and diving in and out of the holes. One of them saw her and dashed up to the bubble. It pressed its snout against the plastic and yipped once as if to say hello. Ella yipped once in return, ducked into the tunnel, and crawled back to Richie. "Did you find anything?" he asked. "No." A large prairie dog charged into the tunnel, brushed past them, and headed for another tunnel. At the entrance, he turned around, stood on his hind legs, looked straight at Ella, and yipped repeatedly. Then he ran back, past them, and then fled outside. "I think he just pointed us to that tunnel," Richie said. "Come on, let's check it out." The scouts crawled along the passageway, and again Ella poked her head up into the plastic bubble at the end. "Do you see anything?" Richie said. "Anything unusual?" Ella glanced back and forth. Everything seemed normal. No, not at all. Suddenly, a group of prairie dogs on the sandy ground charged at the bubble. They crowded the plastic and blocked almost all light of the moon. Ella lowered her head and stared at Richie. "The prairie dogs surrounded the bubble," she shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know what to do." "Me neither. Look again." She stood up and poked her head into the little plastic dome. The same crowd of prairie dogs suddenly stood on their hind legs and leaped up to the top of the bubble. Each time an animal jumped, it landed on the plastic surface and slid down the side until its paws were either back on the ground or planted on top of another prairie dog. Ella flinched as she saw the animal strike the bubble and claw it, leaving long, thin scratches on the sides. "What are they doing?" Richie asked. "I don't know." The prairie dogs were yipping so loudly that the bubble couldn't keep out their sounds. Leaping and climbing over one another, they began to cover the bubble from the ground up, their fuzzy undersides pressed against the plastic. They were making themselves into a prairie dog ladder, the way cheerleaders make a human pyramid. In less than a minute, the last small prairie dog reached the top of the bubble and fell across the only open spot left on the plastic, covering it completely. The animal stopped climbing, scratching, and yipping. Without the light of the moon and the stars, the tunnel was completely dark. The silence was weird and eerie. "Richie?" "Yeah?" "I don't..." Crack! The plastic bubble shifted. Crack! All of a sudden it dropped, and an alarming sound of metal against metal erupted. The walls rumbled, the floor shifted, and large clumps of dirt and sand tumbled down in a huge torrent-like wave. The scouts jumped into each other's arms. "What's going on?" Richie squealed. "What are they doing?" "A switch," Ella said. "The bubble must have fallen against a switch. The floor was spinning." "Ella, what's happening?" The sound of grinding metal intensified as the whirling floor gained speed. Around and around it went. Ella looked up. The bubble was spinning and flinging prairie dogs into the air. Ella! What's happening? Ella looked down, and a circular section of the floor was unthreading like a screw or a soda cap. Richie! Ella screamed. What? Hold on! Richie squeezed her tightly. Not a second later, the floor fell out from under them. The scouts plummeted or fell into the unknown reaches of dark earth. Cliffhanger. Gracie, there's a cliffhanger. She's passed out, shouldn't even care. All right, gonna have to stop and find out. What do you think? Where are they? The floor just fell out from underneath of them. These guys are really brave kids. I can't believe it.